And here we have the most compelling reason why you might want to consider the Retevis A1 as part of your Go Kit. Today's video is sponsored by G Gable Radio. Follow their link in the description below and you'll find some of my favorite amateur radio portable antennas and gear. Hey everyone, I'm Bob, KD4BMG HOA Ham. Retevis did provide me with this radio for my use, test, and review, and so that I could share it with you. Different format today. We're going to get right to the facts. What are the 2 reasons why you should consider owning this radio? 2 reasons that are kind of and then 2 reasons why you may go, I really don't want that radio. I don't think those 2 reasons are compelling at the end, but I'm going to share them with you nonetheless because it's your choice to make with relevant facts. Let's just go with the given. It's a 2 meter, 70 centimeter ham radio handy talkie. It's what we expect from Retevis. Very good quality. It feels solid in the hand. By that, we mean it doesn't feel like cheap plastic. It has weight to it. It has a die-cast frame. We like how that feels. We like how it looks. All the components fit together nicely. No gaps, nothing out of alignment. Exactly what we expect from Retevis. We're going to quickly look at 2 reasons why you would want to own this radio. I'm going to spend most of the time on the first because I think it's the most compelling feature. 2 things that are touted as benefits, we'll talk about that, and then 2 things you would want to look at and go, I wish they could have done just a little bit better on this. We'll wrap up the video towards the end with an IP67 rating test. I haven't tested it yet. We're going to do that together. We're going to dunk it in a jar of water and see if it can withstand that. And of course, we'll do a power test. And finally, we'll wrap it up with, is this radio clean? Does it have any spurious emissions? This is KD4BMG testing the sound quality on the Retevis A1. Test, check. 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 3. No response required. And now we're going to test the sending of my GPS location to that other unit back in the shack. You select your GPS, and then you transmit until the light goes out. So let's just see if you can capture that. And these are my GPS coordinates right now where I am. I'm doing a quick spin here so you can see exactly where I am when I do this transmission. This is the back corner of the Publix building. It's a supermarket near my house. And this is the backside of a townhouse condominium right near where I'm standing. So you have the actual visual of where I was when I did this transmission from the radio. Now, if you were able to capture the coordinates, this is what came through from my radio where I was transmitting from to my radio in the shack. Let's bring this up on Google Maps and let's see, let's zoom in here. I don't know if you can recognize this, but we have a Publix supermarket right here, and we've got what looks like the back of a townhouse complex. Let's put the right layer on here. Yep, there's the back corner of the Publix. There's the apartment complex. Let's do one better, and let's drop the little guy here, right there where the GPS coordinates said I was standing. And let's get a look. Let's spin the same way. All right, not trying to make you sick. Right there. Does that look familiar? There's the back corner of the Publix shopping center. And right here is the back side of that apartment complex, that condominium complex. I was standing right about here when I did that transmit. So guess what? It works. This is easily the most compelling feature of this radio, so I do want to spend a little bit of time here to get to the GPS feature, and this is not APRS. This is true GPS signal transmission from one radio to another. You go into the menu, you navigate down to GNSS, and you hit menu, and you would want to make sure that GPS is turned on. Of course, once you're outside, you'll be able to capture the GPS signal. You'll lock onto a satellite. I actually took this and put it in a window here in the spare room, locked onto the satellite from that window, brought it back here to the table, and that's how I did the test. I can't lock into a GPS satellite from here, but once I got locked in, I could bring it here and complete the test, and that's how I did it. So if you're out in the field and you have this radio with you and you want to transmit your location to the person holding this radio, you just simply hit the exit button. It pulls up your GPS location. You PTT for 2 to 3 seconds. The red light will come on, the indicator light. Once it goes out, your location has been transmitted to this radio or to any other Retevis A1 radio. I do not know if competitors who claim to have this feature are compatible with the A1. All I know is from my reading and investigation, the A1 is compatible with the A1. So as many people as you want to be able to transmit your location to via GPS, you all need to have the Retevis A1. You also need to have it set up the same. We'll talk about this in a few minutes about weaknesses of this A1 kit, and it's the manual. For the most compelling feature of this particular radio, you would want the manual to be very exhaustive on how to pull it off. And it is not. It is woefully inefficient or insufficient in giving you all the information that you need. Now, I was able to finally figure it out on my own. But for something that is such a compelling feature, I would have liked to have seen the manual more detail-oriented on how to accomplish this. Here's why. Let's say there are 10 people within reach of my simplex signal and I key up my location, but I only want one other person to know my location. I don't know those other 8 people. Are they going to get my GPS location? I don't want that. Let me rephrase that. If I just broke my femur bone, I want everybody to get my location. But very specifically, you're supposed to be able to program in a group of individuals that you want to have access to your location when you key up on this feature. I'm not quite sure that I pulled that off. I only have 2 radios. I didn't have a third one to try this with to see if I excluded it. I just wish the manual would have been more helpful in knowing that you got this right. I'm sure with time and testing you could figure it out, but the manual really doesn't give you enough to go on. Great feature, better description. Don't view this as a replacement for a Garmin InReach. Remember, I'm going to get to this in a second. This is simplex based. I can get line of sight as I can with any regular HT. Between 2 HTs, you can transmit the GPS if you have it set up correctly. If you get out of reach of the other person with the second Retevis A1, and you can't reach them via simplex to talk, you're not going to reach them via simplex with the GPS location. It can't go through a repeater. I attempted that through my local repeater system, and it was no joy. So I'm not quite sure if Retevis wanted this to be able to work through a repeater because, of course, the manual doesn't tell me. In my experience so far, I've only been able to get it simplex. So great feature, very intriguing feature. This is a reason perhaps to have this radio if you're in a group and you're in close enough proximity to each other on a hike and you want to be able to find each other in an emergency. This could be something that you would use. Of course, your cell phone might be the first option, but if you're out of cell coverage, you're not going to have any opportunity to protect yourself. If you're really remote, you want something like a Garmin InReach, but for casual use in hiking with multiple people, this might be something that would interest you. The next most compelling feature about this radio is the USB-C charging. Now, that might not sound very unique to you. We're migrating towards USB-C across all of our electronics. This has the cradle with USB-C, and while I'm happy about that, as long as my cradle cord is detachable, I really don't care what it comes in. I'd prefer USB-C. But here I'm talking about USB-C on the radio. The radio itself is USB-C chargeable. You say, Bob, lots of radios are coming out like this. Do you see what it says there on the screen? Flexible to charge your two-way radio or battery during use. Almost every radio I own, every HT, either the user's manual is woefully silent on this subject, or they just flat out say, do not use while charging. Every electronic device I have that's handheld, I use while I charge. Why not my HT? Why don't more manufacturers find out a way to have an HT that can be used? I can PTT while I'm charging, not just listen, but actually key up. Retevis has gone out of their way to tell us you can use this radio while it's charging. That is a feature that we expect and want in the future. So I would say this is the second most compelling feature of the A1 that may point you in the direction of saying this is something I want. But this is where we start to get on a slippery slope. Let's get a little bit more specific about this feature. This USB-C port is behind this plate. So that plate cannot be removed unless you have some type of device that lets you loosen the screw on here. Let's just get me off the screen so I can give you a better view of this. Once I get this loose, and it gets a little bit tight because there is a rubber gasket inside of here. Actually, there are two of them. Let's see if I got far enough to where I can pull that off. Not quite yet. So it's tight, which is a good thing. And it's a good thing because this is an IP67 rated radio. But do you now understand the flaw of the USB-C charging and the IP67 rating? Are you following me? You have to make a choice. It's either or. You don't get both. So you can't really advertise both. Don't tell me that I get USB-C charging in the shack, in the cradle, because IP67 is irrelevant in my shack. When I get outside, IP67 rating is relevant. And if I value USB-C charging, here I have a bipolar choice. Now you say, Bob, you can put that plate back on and just take it off when you want to charge. Of course I could, but how inconvenient is that? And oh, by the way, let's look at one more thing here. The items on this plate that allow for the IP67 rating are loose. And right here is my IP67 rating. So even if I put this plate back on now, I've lost my IP67 rating. So what happens if I'm out in the field and I'm working with this radio? I just crossed a 5-foot deep stream. My radio survived because it's IP67 rated. And now I decide to take off this plate so I can do some charging. And oh, by the way, the last time I did that, I mistakenly popped these off and didn't realize it, and they're lost in the woods. Guess what? I didn't have IP67 rating when I crossed the stream. My radio is probably toast at this point in time. The interesting thing is I'm looking for the radio and just how high is it on the... I'm so sorry I didn't do this in advance. I just did a review and I'm looking up at the list of the rows of my HTs up there. I'll drop a photo in here. I just did a review on a Retevis GMRS radio, and guess what? The USB-C port is exposed and it's still IP67 rated. So I think my frustration here was Retevis knows how to get IP67 rated without hiding it behind that plate, and then I could have had both IP67 rated and USB-C charging. So just be aware of that. You might have to pick which of these two is most important to you, and that's what you roll with. Or if you're out in the field, you need IP67 rated coverage, but you want to be able to charge, then you're going to have to pull that plate off and make sure you don't lose these two little rubber guys. Next compelling feature would be Airband. Of course, 2 meter, 70 centimeter. We expect FM radio on our HTs today, but not every radio comes with the ability to get Airband. For those of us who live near airports, we enjoy this, or at least I do. So anytime there are two radios I'm making a choice between, everything else is equal, but one has Airband and one doesn't, it's an easy choice for me to make. I'm going to roll in some footage of listening to 3 budget-friendly HTs on Airband. They're all being connected via a switch to my ground plane antenna in the attic, which can pick up Airband. I'm not going to prejudice you with my opinion now. I'll just make a comment at the conclusion of that short segment.
Southwest 1501, 13-2, descending 11,000. 1501, transport change, runway 19 right, runway 770. 19 right, 7,000, Southwest 1501. 2331, turn routing 290. Return 290, United 2331. 4365, for the maintain 5,000. 8,000, it's in 34. 11.5, Southwest 4360. 575, United 2146. 19, it's in 34.
If you're interested in high quality airband, you're going to have to invest in a radio that is 10x what these budget radios are. But it's really nice that with these budget radios, we do get airband as an option, even if the quality isn't quite as good as some of the others. To my untrained ear, it's not calibrated, it's not a technical piece of equipment. I did have these in the order in which I thought they ranked from best to worst as far as sound quality, in my opinion. One of the questions I get asked most frequently on the channel, Bob, what's that antenna on all your HTs? It's the Gable Radio stubby antenna, SCH-32. It's good on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. It's a BNC connector antenna, meaning it comes off and on quickly, and this is what I put on all of my HTs. You do need this BNC adapter or some version of this BNC adapter. I'll leave a link in the description below to the stubby as well as this BNC adapter. Gable also offers a BNC adapter. It's far more expensive than some of the other ones. I'll leave links to both. Gable says this is manufactured in Taiwan and Japan, and that's why it's more expensive. It has better materials. I can't confirm or deny, but this is always the antenna that I use. I use my HTs primarily in the shack with hotspots. That's why I like stubbies, and this also hits my local repeater when I go outside. We've covered 4 of our 6 topics. The most compelling feature, GPS transmission, radio to radio, USB-C charging, IP67 rating, even though we haven't put it to the test yet, airband, and then the 2 things that I think Retevis just could have done better. The manual is not that good. It's okay English, it's just insufficient. There's not enough information there. Our HTs are small computers, and we should really be able to take advantage of all the features in them by being informed as to what these things can do. Even if you don't want to print it because you're trying to save a tree or a forest, put it out there digitally so we could get the information that we need. Back to that GPS transmission and the ability to fully utilize it, we need more information. So Retevis, my request is give us a better manual on this. And then finally, the CPS software, it's just adequate. It is something you can download directly from the Retevis website. It's very plain, it's functional, it gets the job done, but it's one of those PC softwares that when you load it up, you get Bill Gates screaming at you in a big red box, don't download this, it'll damage your computer. That really causes a lot of people angst. You can't decide whether you should or shouldn't, and it would be nice if we had a CPS software that didn't do that. As of June 20, 2024, earlier in this week when I was doing some of the video clips, I did check Chirp once again, and no Retevis A1 Chirp support. So if we had Chirp for this, that would be great. So perhaps Retevis can influence Chirp. I don't know how that works, but it would be great to have Chirp programming for this radio. Okay, it's time to check the IP67 rating. I'll speed up this video, but I do put my iPhone here with the timer going so you can see I'm not playing any tricks. We'll put this here for 30 minutes and then we'll test it. Okay, let's give it a test. This is KD4 on the Reddit, transmitting from the out to the radio in the truck. Test 1 2 3 4 5 6. No response. Well, now that didn't go to plan. I think I might know what happened. We're going to try something else in a minute, but first let's go the opposite direction from the truck back to the radio here in the shack and see if it can hear. This is KD4 BMG testing from the Retevis A1 from the truck back into the shack after the 30-minute dunk test. How did our IP67 67 fair? We'll find out in just a second. No response required. As soon as the dunk test was over, I put a red band on this radio so that I wouldn't forget which one was which. That hasn't happened because water's still coming out of this radio. In the little openings here where the speaker is, water gets trapped in there. And I believe possibly the reason why it didn't transmit very well is because the speaker, I should say the microphone hole, I think might have been clogged. Let me see if I can get it up on my close-up camera here, my overhead cam. Get some light here. So on this bottom row right here, this hole right here, I believe is the microphone hole. As best I can tell, I've looked everywhere else for a microphone hole. I can't find one. I'm certain that's it. So my hunch is that perhaps water got caught in there as soon as I pulled the radio out of the jar, and maybe that's why sound was coming through very, very muffled. I could hear it when I played it back coming through on the video. I don't think you heard anything there. So I tried to get a Q-tip in there. I can't get a Q-tip in there, so I just lightly tapped the radio against my hand and kind of splattered some water all across the workbench here. So I think perhaps that hole is empty. Let's go ahead and look at that. It turns on. We're going to go to another room in the house and transmit again and see if we have sound coming through the microphone now into the other radio. We didn't have that before. Let's see if an hour and a half later and me trying to get the water out of that hole, we're good to go. EMG testing on the Retevis A1. An hour and a half after the dunk test, I am talking through the radio or into the radio that was in the dunk test. You're listening on the radio. That was not. Do we have sound? KD4 BMG, testing, clear. We're going to call that a pass on the IP67 rating. Just remember, if you cross a stream and you dunk this in the water, that hole on the microphone might get filled up. So blow it out, tap it a little bit, and make sure that it's clear before you go speaking into that microphone. On the speaker side, there are just a number of holes in that radio, so you don't have to worry about that getting clogged up to where you can't hear. But speaking, all of these HTs have one hole typically for the microphone, and I think it was clogged with water after 30 minutes of being submerged. Next up will be the power test, then the spurious emissions test, then I'll give you my final thoughts on what I think about the Retevis A1. The A1 has 3 power settings: high, medium, and low. We're going to start at high on 2 meters, and we're at 5.2 watts. Give it a second to settle in here, and it looks like it's going to stay at 5.2 watts. I'm measuring here on my Surecom meter and going into a dummy load. I'm changing the settings now to go over to medium power. Let's key up on medium power, and we're at 3.4, 3.3. Yep, 3.4. Looks like that's where we're going to settle in. And now on low power, looks like we're coming in at about 0.9 watts. Let's go ahead and go on over to 70 centimeters. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to key up high, medium, and low. And starting here on high power, we are at 5.4 watts. 5.4, now over to the medium setting, we're at 3.6. And finally, over to the low setting, we're at 0.34. We have the Tiny SA all set up to test spurious emissions. I could talk about all the requirements of being 40 dB down from the fundamental and then the negative 1602 dBm, but it's irrelevant because there are no spurs. There's just a fundamental, and quite frankly, that's what we want to see from all of our radios. That means it's clean. Now, if you own a Tiny SA, but you don't own a power meter, did you realize that you can test the power of your radio on your Tiny SA? So let me just go ahead and show you how to do this with the Ultra. Just follow what I'm doing here on the screen, and you want to do a measurement of watts, and you do the same thing here. You key up, and it's going to measure how many watts your radio is sending into the Tiny SA Ultra. If you did have spurs, each one of those spurs would be giving you a measurement here as well. That's why I don't like spurious emissions, because the spurs are stealing power from the fundamental, the frequency you are transmitting on. I've given you sufficient information for you to make an informed decision. There's only one more piece of data you need. Back to the compelling feature of this radio, sending your GPS location from radio to radio. Once Retevis responds, and someday if it gets that manual to where it's a lot more robust and you know how to exactly set up all the radios that have this feature, understand that the arrow indicator also tells you something about the transmitter and the receiver. On the receiving end, if I was receiving someone else's transmission, their GPS location, the pointy part of the arrow would be pointed towards me. The opened end of the arrow is directional towards them. I didn't point this out earlier, but I think this is a key feature. So if you were line of sight, if you were simplex able to communicate and talk, and they keyed up their GPS location, and they did it 20 minutes later as you were making your way towards them, helping them perhaps while they are in distress, you're going to get another indicator visually as to whether or not you're moving in the right direction. Because let's face it, I don't know about you, I don't know what to do with those GPS signals and degrees and numbers, but I can follow an arrow. Tell me what you think, if this is something that's of use to you. This was the most intriguing thing to me when I heard about this radio, and I wanted to share it with you. I hope you found this useful. I'll talk to you soon, friend. 73.